Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. All members are present. So citizens' comments, do we have anything to question?
No, sir.
Since no one's here. Approval of previous meeting minutes, the February 4th, 2025 meeting minutes are in the packet. Do I have a motion to approve?
Chair, there is one change that should be noted on here, I think. On the election we had for chair and vice chair, I think the last sentence down there, it says, Councilmember Anderson nominated Councilmember Streetman as vice chair of public safety, and then Councilmember Anderson seconded the motion, so.
Should be, I think, me.
So,
That's pretty aggressive.
I'll go back and check my notes. Thank you.
okay. So I don't remember if I seconded it or you did, but it needs to be noted.
yeah.
Thank you.
You can put me down.
Motion otherwise.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Any other comments? All those approved, say aye.
Aye.
So they're approved. No old business, but under of ordinance 2025-0, park agent. I think this really, what I see in here is just it's a change in parking area. It's not.
Is council set new parking fees by resolution in January.
Right.
We then discovered after that resolution was enacted that there was a section of the code that actually established parking rates. So the two, our old resolution and the existing code were not aligned. So what this ordinance will do is it will reference council resolutions as the tool to set parking fees. So
Where in here does that say that? I mean, there's really
What?
4 sections of this ordinance, right?
So section 1,
Permit fees to be amended
Yep.
to state.
yep, and at the end of that, it says, and this is the new section, this is the revision to this section, where the current code has the actual dollar amounts for
Yeah.
each. It now will say, as set by resolution approved by city council.
Okay.
So it is referencing a resolution that will be used.
Do we
to set-
even need this ordinance since it's already set by the resolution?
Well, we have an inconsistent existing ordinance and a new resolution, because the existing ordinance has the old fees in it. And we have a resolution that has new fees, so they're not aligned currently. So we do need to get the two aligned. So going forward, after this ordinance is enacted, in the future, when council changes fees, you'll just do it by resolution.
Okay,
Instead of
got
going
it.
through the two readings of an ordinance change. So it's a bit of a housekeeping item to catch up with what you all did in January.
I hope this is the appropriate place to bring this up, but one of the things that came up early on in this discussion was the lack of having a non-resident seasonal parking pass. Susan Hill Smith brought it up, I think made a good point on that. Since then, there's been other discussion, coming from off-island residents as to being excluded from having some sort of seasonal parking pass themselves. And I think it would probably be good for us to visit that.
I did look into it somewhat from my perspective, and I discovered that County Park has a seasonal parking pass that's like less than what we charge for our weekly parking pass. So I think anyone who wants a parking pass can get it from the county park, and we wouldn't have to, that would eliminate that sort of conflict with, we'd have to go back and
They could, but there's also, it was also noted that there were a number of people who come out here for the beach sweeps.
Yeah.
Who prefer to park in this area here, close to the Windjammer, where they go afterwards to get refreshments, that sort of thing. So, and I've seen a couple of requests from off islanders too, through social media really, that just, makes note that it's not being island friendly if we don't have some sort of not local, non-resident municipal parking pass.
County
And when
Park
we-
is at the other end of the
When we talked
street.
about this at the council meeting, when we voted for the increase, that was a hole, I think, that was left, and it was suggested that the Public Safety Committee entertain that and decide whether that's a good thing or not thing.
Yeah.
I'd suggest we put it on the agenda for April meeting and make a decision if we
Okay.
want to take something to council to amend that. At that time, let us do some work between now and then to kind of make sure we understand what some of the
Sounds
other
good to
rates
me.
are. Yeah. But we did say we were going to address that as part of this committee, so we should.
So just to kind of think out loud on the process, so this would have us enacting an ordinance and a new resolution, which is what the advice has been that we need to do to mimic what was done in January. And then on the heels of that, there could be, I guess, a third resolution, which would add whatever you all want to do. So it will be we'll be constantly kind of amending it, but that's how the process would be.
But as far as this goes, do we have any other discussion on this?
No.
So Douglas, what we need to do is make a commit, take this to council.
That's correct.
And then council, there'll be a first reading and a second reading of this.
There's already been a first reading, so
So
it'd be a second reading
Okay.
with a new resolution
Yep.
at the council meeting at
Yep.
the end of this month.
And including this in the discussion.
Well, I think the April discussion for this group,
Okay,
Would be
that
separate.
would just, that would be
Yeah.
separate. We'll just put it on the agenda for your
Yeah.
okay.
April meeting.
All right, Any
Nicole, you
other,
got that? No? Good.
any other discussion on this?
Well, I think we just need to know, have a record of what the county,
Get a copy of,
Yes.
you're thinking of matching their rates for?
No.
Well, I think we should just
No.
get what they have right now.
What they have,
and then-
what our new rates are.
And we can make a decision
Yeah.
what we want to do, but right now, let's just get the information so
Yeah.
we can bring it here and have a meaningful discussion around what the current situation is. Do I have a motion, though, to approve this, the ordinance here?
So move.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
The second item is discussion of cameras in STR units.
I think I brought that up.
Yeah, do we want to, I think before we get too far into the discussion, maybe we should talk to, have Chief, and I think this resulted from the Nancy Mace declaration on the House floor. And I think there is an ongoing investigation, so we should, I don't know if we can get into the details, we should not get into the details of that particular case, but in general, I think we can have a discussion around, if is there any current ordinances or any things that explicitly prohibits that, or I guess is really what you wanted to try to do, I think, Jan, right? Is to understand if we do prohibit that and how we monitor it.
And have there been any complaints or activities concerning that?
Sure, I can answer all of these. As regards to the conversation from Congressman Mace, that is being investigated by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. We have pledged our assistance to them in whatever capacity they need, but that's where we're at with that right now. As far as have we had incidents, we've had one incident in 2023 where a camera was in a short-term rental. Our investigation actually revealed that it was a family member of the individuals renting there, and the complainant and victim made the decision not to move forward with any charges, so that case was closed in 2023. That's it as far as those types of cases that we've had.
Was that, was the camera in there only when the family that owned the camera was in the rental unit?
Correct. We conducted an investigation, even removing the camera and the contents from the camera, and through our investigation, it was revealed that this was likely a family member involved with it.
Okay.
That was there staying with the victim and complainant. that victim
Okay.
complainant made the decision not to move forward
So it's
at
a
any point.
personal rather than a commercial camera?
Correct.
Okay.
And as far as laws go, we do have, South Carolina has a section 1617-470, which is eavesdropping, peeping, and voyeurism. And it is a very detailed statute that we can use for any cases like that. And they would cover anything like that we had going on out here. In addition, I know the biggest concern would be that videos and things like that could be used for sextortion. And in 2023, the legislators passed 1615-430, which is sexual extortion and aggravated sexual extortion, which were very much needed statutes when they came across. But those two, and then the harassment and stalking statutes that have been in place are very beneficial and would give us the ability to thoroughly investigate any of these crimes. And then also there's disseminating obscene materials and things like that have statutes as well. So there are plenty of state statutes that we could use. Nothing that I could recommend at this point that city council would enact an ordinance. All of these statutes, I would prefer to use those over a city ordinance. If we had a case like this, they just have a much bigger penalty than the city would be able to give. And so did I answer everybody's questions with all that?
It sounds like we're on the case, on the issue now, and if there are any concerns or coming forward that we can handle them.
Well, I just have a general question, because if in a rental unit, Art, assume an owner of a rental unit wants to put a camera in a general area of there, is that illegal?
So
I think we understand, you need to educate people, is what I'm trying to say.
there is. Typically, it depends on your short-term rental company. They will have written guidelines.
Yeah.
Most of them, especially your VRBOs, your Airbnbs, have well-documented rules about cameras. Majority of them, because I've used these as well, when I go on vacation. They have cameras at the door to check in so they can kind of see when you're coming and going, but not inside the residential structure. And those, VRBO, Airbnb, and other short-term rental companies may have those different rules. But when you look at the eavesdropping, it is, voyeurism is for the purpose of arousing or gratifying a desire of sexual intent. And so that's kind of where we're at with those things. And then, peeping Tom also falls under this as well. And in previous agencies, I've made the peeping Tom charge, and it's typically people who are seeking that gratification for their own personal desires. So, we do not want any cameras inside the structure. Outside is good, but anything that's going to be for the purpose of arousing or gratifying any desires is illegal under ordinance. And we would encourage anybody who's a victim of any of these crimes or suspects you're a victim of these crimes or any type of sexual violence, I want you to call us. We are here 24/7, and we want to treat it and investigate it as thoroughly as possible. So don't sit around and think about it. Call us. Let us help you.
Go ahead.
But generally speaking, in regards to short-term rentals or even long-term rentals, there are no rules or ordinances in place that prohibit someone from actually putting cameras in there without somebody's knowledge.
Not that I can see in this ordinance. South Carolina does not have a very solid legislative bill about what short-term rentals can do inside of their company or their homes. Some states do. South Carolina doesn't. They leave most of that to the municipalities to develop those ordinances. And that's, I don't think, as long as it is not for these purposes, I would assume you can. And South Carolina does have, under the statute, one person has to know you're being recorded, and the other one doesn't necessarily have to know. I would highly encourage any short-term rental company to make that known. It may not be a violation of criminal law, but then you're crossing into civil at that point. Because the thing to remember is when somebody rents a short-term rental, when they rent a hotel room, their right to privacy is under the Fourth Amendment. There are protections that are granted at their own residential structures. They follow you when you rent those homes. And so any invasion of that could certainly put you in a situation where if you haven't violated criminal law, you may have violated something civilly, and they need to let people know. Even if you're putting it outside, everyone I've done before I signed the paperwork said, hey, there is a Ring camera outside. That is solely to let us know when you are there and when you are leaving so that we can get people to come clean the house when you're done. And that's, I would highly encourage all of them to do those.
Thank you.
Maybe it could be a topic when we get rental managers together, just to review that situation with them.
Absolutely, and they do have a new short-term rental group that is
Yeah.
kind of an offshoot of the Chamber of Commerce, and we've had limited discussion with them so far. That's something I would like to, we always meet with our short-term rentals, our code enforcement does every year, and we should be getting ready to set that meeting up. And that would be a topic that we talk about with them of, hey, make sure you're staying within the law, make sure you're encouraging these different steps. And they might even come up with their own list of, hey, as an organization, we're going to adhere that not only are we going to obey the laws, we're going to take it a step further and really tighten up our industry to make sure that we are leading the nation in being a safe place for people to stay.
Self-police.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the key takeaway here is that it was called out nationally, and Isle of Palms got mentioned a number of times, and I know that's all an ongoing investigation that really you would be handling along with whatever agency. But it would be, I think, probably beneficial for us as an island that has a lot of rentals to have maybe the Chamber of Commerce and their organization or someone to really be proactive in a step like this. And I think you're on the right track in that regard, too, if you bring that up.
Thank you.
All right, the next item is discussion of short-term rental code enforcement. I think this was, I think, Rusty, you requested this to be on there, and I think this was something that was mentioned.
Well, yeah, it was,
last month.
Well, it's actually an outcome of the citizens' comments we had last month. It was noted on the minutes that a further discussion of these court enforcement suggestions would be added to the March agenda.
Yeah.
So I just asked it to be added since it was mentioned in the minutes, so.
And I think really the focus, if I remember right from the citizens' comments, was around three things that I did take in notes, but
Right.
the primary one was changing the 5-strike time period from being on a calendar basis to a rolling 12-month basis was the key one. And then he had some other recommendations or an ask for us to look at around parking, because there's a loophole from his perspective, and it seems like there could be a loophole that,
Yeah, the three were,
Parking on the street as opposed to-
you mentioned the first one, the 5 strikes being changed to a 365 calendar versus, or changed rather than a calendar year, I mean. The second one was changing ambiguous language around the number of cars allowed. And he was talking about where the language currently reads with 1 car per bedroom or 2.5 cars per total occupancy. And then the third one was allowing cars to park in the easement in front of a house or in front of a neighbor's house to avoid the parking ordinance.
right, those were the three things.
Yeah, and I think it all revolved around
Yeah.
that one case we're all going to be looking at
Yeah.
later on.
I know we don't have the actual ordinance in front of us, but this is something on, it's particularly the first one, that is, I think we've discussed before, and something I think there was some general improvement around is changing that. It doesn't make sense that on a calendar year it ends, just because of this current situation actually that we're in, right? You could have had that all in December and then it restarts again. I think, on a calendar basis, it makes sense if you really want to look at 5 strikes of the code in a 12-month period. To me, it makes sense to do that. And it's something that we probably ought to look at how that language is written and some changes and recommendations to how we would change it and again, bring it to the next meeting. And I don't know about you, I would like to see us, and I mentioned this to Douglas, but go through all the code, all the livability code and short-term rental codes enforcement, and look at it maybe holistically, because there could be some other things. I know 2 years ago, we looked at a list of items that we were going to potentially modify, and I don't think we ever took action on it. And I would like to revisit that and go through as we sit today, are there changes in our code enforcement that we'd like to see? I think we've learned a lot over the last couple of years, and Chief, your recommendation, the code enforcement officer's recommendation, we almost bring that as a topic bring in the entire code, and let's look at it, have input from the chief and code enforcement, and see if there's anything else at the same time we're doing this that we'd like to change as well.
I agree.
I think with respect to the parking, I'm just sitting here thinking about, it's so many allowable cars per unit, and if they can't fit on the lot, then they end up parking down the street or something. Well, in the residential areas, the restrictions on on-street parking end at what, 8 o'clock at night or something like that?
6
6?
o'clock.
Oh, 6 o'clock. So, to me, the difference is you want people to be able to come and visit in the evenings, but I don't think we want cars on the street overnight. It's probably a difference. So is there some way, do we need to tweak that, and that might help with overnight? I mean, the overnight parkers are going to have to go down to Palm Boulevard. We can't do that on Palm, but the other streets, the residential streets, we could.
That has kind of always been the catch-22, is that the solution to parking a lot of cars on-site is to just go off-site, find space. So there's a little bit of a give and take there in terms of which is worse, pushing them all onto the property or having control on the property, which has the effect of them spilling out into public parking spaces. So that's always been a balancing act we've kind of struggled with, so we can put those, get those requirements next month, and we can talk through that in some details.
And monitoring the number of vehicles is relatively easy because you can count cars, but you still don't know how many occupants are actually in the home because you don't have access
That's correct.
inside the home.
When this first came out a couple weeks ago, I was actually at a training with some other law enforcement officials from other islands, and this topic came up, and they actually have a placard at the end of the driveway that says this is how many bedrooms there are, this is how many vehicles are allowed. And that way, it took away any guessing of the officers responding at night, and the individual that was getting there, they saw it when they pulled into the driveway right there. I know we put those inside, but the officer doesn't necessarily get to go inside the house without probable cause of a crime. So if it's at the base of the driveway, that's something we could look at adding to make that easier for those officers responding.
I guess the flip side of that is if we don't have strict parking regulations, then the number of cars is an indicator of how many illegal people they have inside, staying inside. I don't know whether it's sort of a catch-22.
The thing to remember is when you look at your parking for residential parking permits and the time that they end, that is all part of our parking plan. And so any change to that is a significant change to our parking plan.
Okay.
Can you send us, like, instead of waiting to, a few days before the
Yeah.
meeting, can you send us now the code, that section of our code that deals with
All the short-term rental
short-term
things?
rentals, unfortunately, yeah.
Absolutely, yep.
And give us at least some time to kind of prepare and think about it, ask questions if we want to ask questions, but in order to prepare for the next meeting.
Yep, we can do that this week.
On a side note, one code enforcement, just thought I would share. Yesterday, I was able to give a conditional offer for our one code enforcement vacancy. Our current code enforcement officer was also given a conditional offer for police officer.
Yeah.
However, we have a potential additional conditional offer that is ready whenever our current code enforcement finishes all their obligations to roll with the police officer. We've already got somebody in the wings ready to go for a conditional offer for the other code enforcement spot.
So you have both of them
You have two conditional offers?
potentially.
I've got the current code enforcement officer has a conditional offer for police officer. However, I can't give him that final offer until he meets all of his requirements, which should be next week. We gave one conditional officer or offer for the vacant code enforcement yesterday. As of this morning, once code enforcement officer Renner finishes his requirements next week, we will have somebody else to give a conditional offer to fill the other code enforcement spot.
What are they conditioned on?
They have to Well, for police
No,
officer,
the
the
code
code enforcement is a physical and drug screening.
Okay,
And maybe, like, sometimes if I haven't talked to their current employer,
Yeah.
it might be a
so
condition.
it's a short period of time.
I can knock it out in 1 week.
Yeah, yeah, good, that's good news. All right, the next item is discussion of surfing instruction applications, and there's a bunch of information in the packet, but you want to
Yeah,
comment on
so,
this, Doug?
yeah, so this is probably the third or fourth year that the city has allowed surf instruction on the beach when approved by city council. You have 5 in your packet that have applied to be considered for approval, and you have their locations. They're 6th Avenue, 8th Avenue, 21st Avenue, 26th, and 34A. I believe those locations line up with where they were previously approved. I'm not certain about that. I do know that, council wanted them to be somewhat kind of spread and not all in one area. So they appear to be doing that. The other part of this is that in our code, there are a number of requirements in terms of insurance coverages, indemnification requirements, the number of, certain things that the city staff needs to audit for in these applications, which we haven't done yet, but we will do. And it'll be a matter of them getting their certifications up to date, but they have to be CPR certified, have the proper insurance, have this indemnification language. And then there are other requirements in terms of how many students they can have, how many instructors per student they can have, and how many hours per day that they'll be out there. So to
Do they sign
my,
agreements, though, with us, and that outlines all that, or those requirements?
they provide us the certifications that are required, and then they just have to adhere to the standards in the code. And we make them clear of what the standards are.
Because I noticed that there's a couple of these insurance, at least one insurance is expired, and the other one's going to expire shortly.
Yeah. So they will need to, they'll need to update that, provide us
Yeah,
the
this one, because
documentation.
this one expires in April, and there's one that was expired last year. I don't think they've updated theirs from last year.
Do we know if there's any surfing instruction businesses that are operating illegally on the beach?
Not that we're aware of, I don't think.
Nobody's brought any to our attention. We might have had one last year or the year before, I can't remember exactly when. And our code enforcement had made contact with them and let them know the rules and regulations, and they ceased operation.
Okay, so code enforcement routinely during the surfing instruction season, do they,
Well,
Patrol and check licenses.
Plus our animal control, who patrols the beach for the leash laws, will also point out to code enforcement if they need to go follow up with anybody, or if we get a complaint, which is how the other one was driven. It was driven from a complaint. That's how we typically respond to them.
okay.
All right, so what do you want to do with this? We're going to bring this to council. Do we need to vote on anything?
I don't think you need to. I mean, this would be if you all were of a mindset to go a different direction than we have previously done, you'd let us know, but without that, we'll just continue vetting that they have everything that they need to have, and this would be before council for final approval.
And we've had in place all along that they reapply each year.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Yep. So everybody agree with
Good.
that?
Yeah, I
All
think
right.
it's fine.
All right, Douglas.
Okay.
The next item is discussion of Aviation Authority Mutual Aid Agreement. I think that's in the packet here as well, but assume you want to talk about that.
This is just a standard mutual aid agreement with a law enforcement partner. Aviation Authority is a great partner of ours, and these are important to us because when we have things like spring break coming up or those busy summer days, we're able to tap into these mutual aid agreements to ask for assistance from these agencies, and this will just kind of give us that ability with the Aviation Authority.
Do we already have it with them, and this is an update, or this is a
We-
new one?
We have one with them, but they're updating, they've had a change in their personnel over there and probably a change in their board, and so I think just to make sure we're all on the up and up, they wanted to update it, which I think is a good, solid practice.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
No.
All right.
Sounds good to me.
Next item is review of the 10-year operational budget for the police and fire department. The information is in the packet, so I assume Deborah's going to maybe take us through that.
Yes, I just want to highlight some of the things that changed the most in the packet. As we discussed in the council meeting, we are assuming a 2.5% COLA and a 3% merit. I did check with Foley, Sullivan's, and Kiowa, and they all based theirs on COLA, which they follow CPI, and CPI is currently 2.5 to 2.6 until June of this year, and then at the end of the year, it's projected to go to 3.7 through 25 and into the fall of 26. So that is something we can discuss in the budget meeting to see where council wants to land.
Where's the state at?
State is also at COLA.
At 2.5? Or?
I don't know the dollar
No.
amount. I meant the percentage, but I.
So in
don't
other
know.
words, you're saying that the surrounding areas are all just doing cost of living and not merits, that they're going to,
They're
their
just doing-
total amount is in the range of 2.6% or something like that.
Right, whatever the CPI is, that's
Yeah.
correct, yes,
Yeah.
sir. So that is something that you can decide whether you want to do both or just do one.
Yeah.
As far as the biggest changes, we're going to just focus on column U, which kind of talks about the, or show you what the changes are. Of course, I just discussed payroll, but that may change. One of the largest changes here, the phone system, we are looking at changing the phone system to be what the City Hall phone system is. We don't have a exact quote on that yet, but we put some funds in there to anticipate that we will change our current phone system at the Public Safety Building to what City Hall has, and that's with Segra.
Can I back up, though?
Absolutely.
On salaries and wages, and I'm just going to look at the salary and wages line, which is line 6 on here, but it shows if you do 5.5%, it's about $2,028,000, and it's about $50,000 lower than this. So I assume are we adding headcount there?
I don't think we had I have to double check. I
Okay.
don't remember adding any new positions, and
Would that be the BSOs?
No, the BSOs
No,
are
it's
on
in
the
a different-
next
different
page.
line
Okay, I
item.
got a question about that.
Yeah.
too, but
So,
that-
John, that's the difference between column O and T?
I'm just taking, and by the way,
Percentage.
Deborah, I think it'd be really, really helpful, at least from my perspective,
Mm-hmm.
is if we could get an updated forecast for '25 before the budget workshop, because we're comparing everything here from last year's budget. So we're doing budget '26 to budget '25. But if our budget was way off in '25, we're just extrapolating that error through. We could be way off, lower, we could be way higher, but we're just comparing to last year's budget, not the actual. So at this point, we should have, I think, a fairly good understanding of what the forecast for the year should end up, so we can update that column. And it's a check for me to say, well, look, we budgeted 1.9 million, but we're actually running 2.1 million, so yeah, we understand why, we're gonna have to budget higher next year.
Right.
But as opposed to whatever the budget was. But what I'm saying to you, Douglas, is that if we look at the 1.9 million that was budgeted last year, 1.922,
Yeah.
and you put 5.5% onto that, which is what the increase in salary is, it's 2.028 million. And not 2.075, so it's about $50,000 difference, so I don't know if we're adding a head count or what we're doing
Okay.
to it. Yeah. And the other thing in that same thing is on line 11, where group health is basically flat. And I know in here, in the write-up, it says that PIBA's going up 7% on 1/1/26, so it seems like we should have an increase in our health insurance by some amount there as well.
Right, well, that could be predicated on the, whatever package the employee chooses. So what I do is I go through the employee list and see what they're choosing. So if some were in family and now they may be just employee child or just employee, that could drive those rates. So, but I'll double check all of it. And I did, before I submitted this, I did kind of go through the forecast to see if we were going to kind of land on budget, or whether we were not on most of the lines. And it looks like, I'll double check it, because that was through January. But now we have another month, so I'll,
Yeah.
review that again. But we were kind of tracking to what the budget said. But we'll have more data at the end of this month to be able to.
I would just look at that, because if we're not adding headcount, just understand at least what that is, because this would suggest we're adding somebody in there.
Don't we normally look at all of that during the budget workshop, or we get together and looking at where our actual run rate or dollars are at that point?
We do, but I'll double check this so
Yeah.
I can have more accurate information when we do have that meeting, those meetings.
Okay.
Like I said, the phone system, IT is just updated to cover what we currently have in those line items. And if you just add up all the stuff that we say we're gonna do in line 24, then that's where the 75,000 is coming from, which is $8,000 more than we did last budget. The other thing is we added investigative fees. Well, before that, the $12,000 is coyotes and hazmat services that the police department is adding, because we did not have that budgeted prior to, but we're spending money there. And then the $2,000 is just an investigative fees that's being charged by another service. The chief can elaborate on that service that's being provided. That is new.
The Coyotes isn't, you got 6,000 in there, is that enough for what we saw at the end of last year, and then plus what we're doing this year?
It's hard to know for sure, because we didn't do it the years before. We had a lull before we've done them. It falls in line with what we spent last year, but I think to really get a true value of it will be this year, and it's also driven by how much sighting we have and how many incidents we have for that. Like currently, we have three areas that are out with 6 traps, and that runs about $1,100 for 2 weeks to do that. And then there's a fee if anything is caught in it, $200 for anything that's not a coyote, and a set fee for a coyote that has to be euthanized as a result of being captured.
All right, so it's a good starting point, but we need to look at it for this year, I guess, what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
If we look at line 46, on the part-time wages, that is our BSOs. We determined that we will forego one off-duty officer at the park and add 2 BSOs, and that equates to $20,000, and that $20,000 savings is on line 72. The $30,000 on line 59, in the past budgets, the HVAC system has always been a separate line item, and this year budget, last FY25, we combined those 2 lines, so that $30,000 is HVAC. And it kind of carries through. Now, we don't replace HVAC every year, but we don't know when it's going to fail. So we're not really sure the best way to carry this in the budget because it's unknown.
This is to replace the HVAC? If it fails?
I think that's a replacement cost, yes.
What-
Or maintenance cost on it if it's,
Why wouldn't that fall under the 1% that we budget for the total?
that is the 1% line.
Yeah, but there's a total one, right? Down on, I think it was on the previous page. So that is under the, you're saying that is line 59?
Is the building 1%?
Okay,
Yes, sir.
all right, got you.
The line 73, there is, of course, capitals that we've already reviewed, but that's.
Well, let me go back a
Yes, sir.
minute before you go.
No, go ahead.
Why is it higher, though? If we're just doing 1% plus that amount of the HVAC, or shouldn't we just do 1% and then if the HVAC and it falls in that? Because it's 30% high, it's $30,000 higher than last year.
Mm-hmm.
And last year we did 1%.
Last year, I don't think we.
I think,
budgeted.
I believe that the public safety building is the one that, because it was newly renovated, we did a 0.5% for the first few years after the initial renovation, and that, I think I recall that we didn't feel like we needed as much.
So you're saying
Maintenance.
last year we did 0.5% and now we're going to 1%?
That's my
Can you
recollection.
check that?
I
just to
can
make sure?
check that,
Yeah.
yes, sir.
I know that we didn't budget percentage-wise as much for the building when it was newly renovated.
Because it looks like the following year we're going out about the same, 125, 125, 165, then back to 125.
Okay, so that would kind of indicate there's a HVAC replacement on top
Yeah.
every so often.
It was 1% through FY '23 to '26, or 2% in FY '27.
Okay, so it went to 2%. And then 2% on out.
That's correct. 27 plus.
But I guess my point is that that's why we put 1% in there,
Right.
is to cover things like HVAC and this other thing. So if we do 1% plus the
Plus
HVAC,
that.
Right.
we're kind of like, whoa.
Yeah.
Well, the HVAC was never included in that 1%. In the previous budgets, it wasn't. It was a
Yeah.
separate line item. So there were two lines. There was one for HVAC. It was on its own separate line. And then the 1% was just for the structure of the building. And so
Yeah.
those lines were combined.
HVAC has always been our kind of Achilles heel out here, that it is a big ticket item that we just seem to get hit with a little bit out of the blue, and
All right,
It's
so-
expensive,
So you're
so
saying it
maybe
was
that's the
two
reason.
separate line items and you combine them into one now?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that the-
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's correct. Line 73 is the capital we discussed. That's the SUV and then the 10 new computers. The line 84 is just based on the forecast, current forecast of where we're landing, and we just use that number for the future years. Line 30 is, line 87. Line 87 includes some expenses for the kiosks, and we confirmed this morning with PCI that they are now responsible for any maintenance on the kiosks. However, if the city would like to continue to use cash in any of the meters, once those meters fail, the city is responsible for replacing any meters. So that would need to go into our capital items like every 6 years or so, which we have not done that yet. So the capital may change for maybe 31, 32, somewhere around there. And the cost of those are like $10,000.
so we should take out the recurring 2 and potentially put a 10 in. And I think they
At least
replaced it
one.
last year, so 2030. We should have a
Ken?
10 in there.
So we have spaces that can't use the kiosk? It's either kiosk or cash?
So you can pay by app anywhere, but
Yeah.
if you want to pay by cash, you'll have to find one of these kiosks, pay it, and then take your receipt back to your car and pay that way. PCI says that, it's very much a preference in community, from community to community. Folly Beach, you just don't have the ability to pay by cash at all. 5 years from now, and we got a new kiosk last year, so we're set kind of for 5, 6 years. Oh, yeah, sorry, we got 2 kiosks last year. So we're kind of set for a few years, but when it comes time to replace those, probably 2030, we'll have a decision to make. Are we comfortable just going away from cash totally? Or do we want to spend the $10,000 to have the visitors have the ability to pay by cash still?
In the key.
And that would be on us.
That would be your decision.
But what about all these parking meters? I mean, why do we need those if we've got the kiosk and the pay by app?
We actually don't have any parking meters. All we have are the kiosks.
Okay, so the 10,000 is for to keep the kiosk, maintenance on the kiosk?
To purchase a new one.
New one, okay.
Yeah, they'll
Sorry,
continue to do
misunderstood.
they'll continue to maintain them and keep them functional,
Yeah.
but eventually they just come to the end of their life and the whole thing has to go.
We bought 2 last budget year, and the budget year before that, we bought 3. So
Okay.
we're pretty good right now with them being operational, but they do cost money to keep them up and running because of the environment we're in. They do tend to go down more frequently than they would further inland.
Okay. I think we should probably plan to phase them out eventually with maybe only having one for someone who doesn't have a credit card, and, that's a barrier to coming to the beach.
But I would guess the desire to pay with cash is steadily going down each year, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean,
The reports that we're getting are showing that the number of people using the app is one of the highest ways that people are paying for these things now. We don't have a lot of cash turnover like we used to. App is probably the highest, and then credit card, and then cash.
On line 105, there is a kind of, it's called a LSV. It's a small unit that was used for parking that will be removed. It's $18,000 because PCI will provide their own vehicles moving forward.
You mean that we were scheduled to purchase one this year, and now we're not? Is
That's
that-
correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
that's part of the
Capital.
85,000 on that line?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so
So
go
that'll
down by
that'll
15.
come out.
Okay.
And that's all I have for police, unless you want to add something, Chief?
Not unless you have questions.
So the total budget, way it sits here right now, is about 7% increase over last year, about 306,000, so.
And
which
most of that's
majority
in
of it's
payroll.
Payroll.
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
yeah. That's why we should just check that payroll number just to make sure.
Surely will. And the same thing with the fire, as you can see, that most of the expenses stayed flat, even though we said in our assumptions that we were going to increase them. Where we could save, we tried to save, and where we needed to increase, we tried to increase. Now, one thing we did with fire this year that we had not done prior to, we decreased that by 5% like we do for police, because not all those positions are filled year-round. So this assumes 5% wage decrease from what we had done in the past. With all,
Yeah, this one's opposite of the
Right.
police, right? Because you're going up 5.5%, but the total amount that we're showing here is a 2% increase. So
Yeah.
that reflects something that, like, you're taking away heads.
well, we're not taking away heads, we're just saying that all positions won't be filled.
But
So
you
we
did that last
redu-
year, too, though.
Not in fire, only in
Oh,
police.
Last year you didn't in fire?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. This is the first time we've done it, but after reviewing and talking about it, both departments should assume, because both departments are not 100% filled any time of the budget season, of the budget year.
Yeah, so that makes the police math even more confusing.
Yeah.
So something's off there.
Okay. We'll see what happened there.
All right.
In the fire department, we added $6,000 for a conference, CPSE conference, that's new. Fire chief can explain what that conference is if needed. we increased line 23 by $5,000 to compensate for the age of Tower 1002, as that tower is getting older. And for the IT equipment, that increased,
Increase 18,000, it looks like, right? 53, almost 54,000.
yes, that increased because we added a new software called CruSense, and there's an additional software for, what was the additional software? I can't remember. There were two different softwares that we added in that line item.
Yeah, they were for our RMS and LMS, our record management, and then learning management systems, our training platform.
What's this stuff in there says about inventory and maintenance software, scheduling? Is there, my only question, Chief, is there any cost savings with the implementation of some of these technology and software that we would achieve by it?
So we bundled the software that we currently have, which is our LMS, our learning management system. That is where our CruSense talks about in our maintenance. So that is provided through one vendor. So there's a little bit of cost savings there because we're bundling services.
Yeah.
It definitely makes us more efficient. So it takes some of the time away dedicated to those tasks of doing what we have to do every shift. So it's made our battalion chiefs, captains, made our whole shift, everybody that's involved with those processes more efficient. So our labor can focus on other tasks, preventative maintenance, long-term strategic planning, capital needs, training that we couldn't focus on before because we weren't as efficient with some of the past processes.
How about some of the maintenance scheduling? Would that have any savings and maybe on equipment?
So that's the reason we moved to the checkoff where we can do it electronically, and it'll keep a record and send an email saying, hey, this is, needing attention. That honestly could be a, full-time position for somebody. So what we're trying to do is use this software to leverage it to where we are more efficient without having to bring a person in full-time.
So it's a cost avoidance as opposed to anything that we can say, yeah, we can, by doing that, we can trim this line item in the budget. It's more of a cost avoidance in the future, saying, hey, if we don't do this, we have extra cost.
Correct. You
Yeah.
could look at it that way, definitely.
Okay.
Okay, where are we? So the labs and online 33, medical and lab, we decreased that by $20,000. We bumped that up in FY '25 to compensate for the additional paramedic supplies, but since those things were purchased in 2025, we're going to scale that back down, so that's a $20,000 savings there. For line 37, we added this is a new wellness and resilience, and the chief can elaborate a little bit more on that program. 37.
Sure. So that's the MUSC Resilient Responder Program. That is part of our mental health and wellness push. We've been working with our firefighters on being financially fit, physically fit, and mentally fit. And so we're kind of using that three-prong approach. And the LENS program has absolutely been phenomenal with their support, and they supported that cost at 100% for the first year. And we would like the city to take over that piece of our programming because we have seen a lot of really good feedback from that, and it's very, very valuable. So we believe that's something the city should fund. And then if we have additional programming that we would like to explore, that's when we go to Lens and say, hey, we see value here, let's try it. It's an unbudgeted expense. Can you support it? We provide feedback to them, we get the data. We're like, okay, this is valuable. Now we can approach the city to see if the city can fund this initiative. But it's definitely investing in our personnel. We've seen really good outcomes from the MUSC Resilient Responder Program. The city of North Charleston, they use that same program for their firefighters. Other agencies have similar things that they're doing. But we moved to adding the financial piece because we know, obviously, with inflation and those kind of struggles, our firefighters, we all need that education so we can make the most use of what we have. And so a lot of stresses that people have are, financial in nature. So we wanted to add that piece to the, critical incident stress, the mental health piece of what we're doing. So the mental, physical, and financial piece is all kind of rolled into one. So.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Line 51 is a provision for body armor. We purchased body armor in FY '23 and have not purchased any more since then. So we are budgeting for FY '26, FY '28, and FY '30. That may be something that maybe some flexibility there, whether we need it or not, but that's what that is.
So this was as a result of the shooting on the beach when you had to go out and your people had to go out on the beach to rescue somebody when still an unknown situation, I think, of whether there's a shooter out there, right?
Yes, and Chief can elaborate too, but during that event, we were in what you call the hot zone or the warm zone because our police department and other agencies were still working on making the scene safe.
Yeah.
And so our firefighters were in an unknown area in a hazard zone, and I believe there were additional funds left over that council had approved, and Chief was gracious enough to allow us to use those to outfit our firefighters with that ballistic protection. And it would only be replaced if it was due to failure or if it ages out. And the Kevlar has, and Chief can speak more to that, a time frame when you have to replace that just due to the manufacturer's warranty, due to the life.
And so it came from the 2023 shooting. When we pulled the victims off of the beach and brought them to the fire department on the roadway, it was still very active there on the roadway. And we definitely saw a need since they were willing to, because a lot of fire departments aren't willing to come into that hot zone or that warm zone very, very easily. It's not, they typically aren't around those types of environments. So we want to make sure that if they're going to meet us there, that they have every protection that they need to be there with us and they're taken care of. With the ballistic vests, they do have a 5-year is when they should be replaced at 5 years. They probably last longer, but the vendors are all going to tell you 5 years is the max. And I do know we've taken them and shot them further out, but they will all tell you 5 years is their max and you need to be replaced. And so we just, in the police department, we have a rotation that we're able to pay for them and keep them new. But you do have to replace them at 5 years.
It's sort of the Best Buy date.
Pretty much, that's correct.
You could probably be effective longer than that, but you wouldn't want to take the chance.
So we probably could remove FY '26 and just do FY '28 and then 5 years from FY '28. So we'll remove that 13,000 from there. Line 72, all the capitals are already baked in here, but this one was a little bit more than what the previous budget was. And this is just 1/3 of the high water vehicle and the equipment for that high water vehicle. We only have the high water vehicle in there. We do not have the boat in there because committee suggested that we only put one of the two bigger items in there. And so we chose to put the high water in there in hopes that we could get that one. But if we get a grant for the boat, then that would replace the boat will replace this high water vehicle.
Okay, I'd just like to make one comment. We received a comment from one of our citizens, Jim Smiley, was wondering why we need a high-water vehicle when we have others. And I don't think he understood fully how important that is. In the December storm 2 years ago, one of my friends he and his wife could not get back to their residence in Wild Dunes and ended up in the Forest Trail area with 3 feet of water in their car. Fortunately, they were not in a life-threatening situation, but the rescue couldn't come get them because the vehicles that they had would have been totally destroyed, I think, and unless it was a life-threatening situation, we were not going to put hundreds of thousands of dollars or $1 million piece of equipment in there to rescue them. So there was a need for this gap between whether you've got somebody that's life-threatening or just distressed, stranded somewhere. And that's going to be I think we're going to need it even more going forward.
You have anything to add, Chief?
One of the things I think we asked too, Chief, and you weren't there when we talked about this at the last meeting, Chief Tui was, but is there an opportunity for a grant on this as well? And I think he was going to trade back and try to see if there was some opportunity, but that would certainly help things along if there was a grant opportunity somewhere along the lines.
Yes, sir, 100% agree. So we're very aggressive about our grant opportunities, and he has reached out to the vehicle manufacturers to see what's available. With the recent federal government, with some of the suspension of some of the programming, there's some uncertainty about what federal grants will be available and when they will be available, if it'll be like it has been in years past. For example, the port security grant, typically you would see the notice of funding opportunity during the next few weeks. It opens in April, closes in May. And the vehicle grants, the same type of thing. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So he's been reaching out directly to the manufacturers because so much of their business is predicated on federal monies with these high dollar purchases. So we're still doing some research on that, but absolutely, yes, sir, we're trying to maximize our dollars, and there are other opportunities out there we're trying to look at to be most efficient.
Thanks.
The last bit of information is the fire department 1%. That it shows increase in expenses. And I'm not sure why the revenue doesn't show on this as well, but all of these increases are due to what we currently are spending, the actual dollars. But there's revenue that come in to offset all of these. So
What line are
there's,
you on, Deborah?
I'm sorry, I'm on line 78
78,
and 82
okay.
of the 40 fund. So there are always revenues from the 1% fund to offset these increases. So these kind of net down to minimum increases overall. And again, I'm not sure why the revenue side is not showing on this, but I will have to make sure that I add it so we can see it, but it does wash out. Does kind of zero itself out, I think,
Okay.
yeah.
So that you're saying the revenue's not in, but the expense, the 1% is, but not the revenue side.
Right, it does, it's just not on this page, I'm not sure
Okay.
what happened to it, but
Got it.
it's just not showing on this page, but there should be revenue to offset all these expenses
All right.
in the 40 fund. And that's all I have, unless you have
So
questions.
the bottom line on the fire then is a 1% increase, right, going up 86,000, which seems to be all payroll as well.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, sir.
But
And I will review both departments to
those.
make sure we're capturing everything correctly.
Yeah.
And these will be also presented we'll kind of polishing them up between now, distributing the entire budget, and then the workshop on the 12th
Right.
with all of it.
So after
together.
all the meetings, we will address all the questions, update anything that we need to update, and have a clean packet for council to review for the budget meeting well in advance of the meeting.
Yeah, the meeting's next
Wednesday.
Tuesday or
Wednesday.
Yeah. Okay. Any other item? Comments?
Yeah, I've got one housekeeping item here. Are we miscellaneous now, Chair, or are we?
Unless you have something else to add on the budget.
No, good on the budget.
Yeah. Miscellaneous business.
Yeah, one housekeeping item. Chief Oliverius, you weren't here last month, but Deputy Chief Tui was, and he was going to mention to you about an ADA compliant wheelchair for Station 2. We haven't had a chance, you and I specifically, to talk about that, but we'd had a request from some residents down, or one resident in particular that has a wheelchair-bound child, and now that we have the ADA compliant access points down there, it'd be, we think, more convenient for visitors and residents alike if we had a chair at Station 2. And Desiree had, I'd reached out to her last November and mentioned this to her, and she said there were funds available and she would get with you in regards to that.
That's correct. Yes, sir. We, it's a great opportunity down there at that space, at the public dock. For us, it's a program that is, I mean, we get, I think, our usage in that program, we'll have all those chairs rented on our busy days pretty quickly. Police department's an awesome partner for that, and we kind of divide and conquer. You know, we take care of the maintenance, we go down there and get the chair. The police department, you know, takes the credit card and takes the information, and so it does take a lot. Our firefighters aren't at Station 2 all the time because they might be out training, and so we want to be responsive to our customers. So we've talked about different ways we could make that happen. So we're still in the discussion stages. There is money in the budget that we can purchase an additional chair, so we've got some quotes on that. But we've also had some people interested in a walker that has the same type of tires, so we're investigating that. So it's a program that's growing, and we definitely are going to look at how we expand that here at Station 1 and then Station 2 also. We just don't know exactly how we're going to get it done at Station 2 because, our people aren't always there, and sometimes they're not as accessible. So we're still working on that, but yes, we are aware.
So you don't need to put anything into the budget regarding that then?
Not at this time. It's already budgeted.
Yeah.
We already have it. The city already has it set aside. There is a pretty big lead time on the chairs because the back is embroidered.
Right.
With our city logo and all that. So yes, we're working on it. I should have more of an update that I could provide prior to or at the next public safety committee.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, then the next meeting's April 1st at 11.
April Fool's Day.
April Fool's, that's right. All right, no further business. I have a motion to adjourn.
Uh,
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.